Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. It is another tough day for BC's already struggling forest industry as new U.S. tariffs on lumber and some wood products take effect. What will this mean for BC's economy? And what will it mean for BC workers? Mill workers, loggers, truckers, and contractors. If you work in forestry or a related industry, how has the decline affected you? If you're just starting out, what changes do you think are needed to ensure the industry's future? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. We're taking your calls this hour, and you could call us now. How are BC's forestry struggles affecting you? We want to hear from you, especially if you work in forestry or a related industry. What do you think this means for BC's economy, and what's needed to ensure its future? Our number is 604-669-3733. Or dial 1-800-825-5950. Just hit pound 690 if you like, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. You can also leave a comment on our TikTok Live. In the last hour, BC Premier David Eby and Forest Minister Ravi Parmar addressed the new 10% tariffs on lumber exported to the U.S. Eby has written a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney calling the new measures unjustified. And he said many forest companies are on a razor's edge of survival. In fact, some, he said, will not survive. Eby said Canada's forest industry needs the same urgency as steelworkers and auto manufacturers.
And this attack has serious consequences for Canadians and for British Columbians. When auto parts makers, when people who work to build those auto parts, when steel workers in Ontario, when their jobs are in trouble, when their jobs are threatened, it's treated as a national emergency, and rightly so. These are foundational industries for Ontario, for Canada. And I feel the urgency around those steel jobs as much as any Canadian. And what we're asking for today is that same respect, that same concern, that same sense of emergency is shared for the forest sector in this country. The contributions of the forest sector to the Canadian economy are massive. Provides a greater direct contribution to Canada's GDP than auto parts and steel. It provides more direct employment across the country than either of those sectors. And so with this additional threat that we are facing from the president, we know that it isn't just, another thing that Donald Trump is saying. This threat is a direct threat to the livelihood, to the existence of mills in every corner of British Columbia.
45% softwood lumber duties and tariffs that are impacting our ability to be able to provide world-class wood products to the United States, to be able to build the homes that middle-class Americans are desperately needing. These duties, these tariffs, are nothing more than a tax on middle-class Americans who want nothing more than to be able to build homes, build community. This is an attack on them as much as it is an attack on Canadian workers as well.
That was Forest Minister Ravi Parmar, and before him you heard BC Premier David Eby. And we'll have more on BC's response today. Stay with us. Coming up at 12:45, we'll talk to CBC's Provincial Affairs reporter Katie DeRosa. Now, as you heard as well, American businesses south of the border are expected to feel the impact. And there are concerns that the restrictions on Canadian lumber would slow home builds as Americans deal with their own housing supply issues. And we have a statement here from the National Association of Home Builders. When these tariffs were announced last month, they said that these tariffs would create additional headwinds for an already challenged housing market by further raising construction and renovation costs. It also said that Canada accounts for nearly 85% of all U.S. lumber imports. Well, Michael Howard is the owner of Howard Family Designs in Warren, Michigan. And he says his business depends on Canadian product and the tariffs could threaten his livelihood. He spoke to the CBC's Artie Pohl this morning.
the American economy, American businesses like yours require Canadian lumber. Why is that? How important is it?
The great country of Canada supplies 70% of all softwood lumber to the U.S. We only supply 30% of our own softwood lumber because we do not have the capacity to do more. And so this tariff is not benefiting American lumber at all because we literally do not have the capacity to build out the infrastructure to make more lumber mills. And so it is necessary for us to rely on Canada for our lumber supply. So that's your plywood sheets, your 2x4s, your pine, and some other softwoods like cedar. We rely on Canada for that supply.
You know, you've been talking about the impact that this is having on your business and businesses, of course, like yours. Do you think that's being heard by the general American public and by the administration that's putting these tariffs into place?
It's absolutely not being heard by the administration. I'm not quite sure what their agenda or their purpose is. They say American first, but this is clearly hurting Americans. One of my team members, he's one of my apprentices, he just lost his full-time job, or he's laid off because of the tariffs on Canadian tariffs on aluminum. And so now he works for me as well as a part-time job, and now we're suffering because of the Trump's tariffs on lumber. And so this is directly hurting Americans and their ability to provide for their families. It's also hurting our friends and families on the Canadian side of the border.
Well, we are asking you what these new lumber tariffs mean for BC's forest industry. And if you work in forestry or a related industry, we'd love to hear from you. How have its struggles affected your own livelihood? What do you think can be done to improve forestry's future? Love to hear from you on the open line this hour. It's 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you're joining us on TikTok, do feel free to leave a comment there. Randy wrote us an email from Burnaby. And Randy writes, new ? Those affected directly need to form some kind of buying group to get a volume discount on the purchase of neck braces to help with the whiplash. As with nearly all American tariffs, these are fluid and subject to the whims of Donald Trump. There's no rationale, only economic cruelty clouded by bad PR, voiced by incompetent supplicant appointees. We live in uncertain, unstable, and dangerous times. Elbows up, out, and forever. That's from Randy. Writing us bctoday@cbc.ca. Robert writes as well, this would be a good time for the Carney government to invest in low-cost housing projects across Canada using BC wood. Thanks both for your emails. Again, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. And meanwhile, today, the forest sector also issued a joint statement calling on the government of Canada to bring the same urgency to the lumber file as it has to steel, aluminum, and energy, saying that their industry is facing an unprecedented period of challenges. Joining me now for more on that is Kurt Niquidet. He's president of the BC Lumber Trade Council, which was a signatory to this joint statement. Kurt, thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
I imagine it's a tough day. These tariffs were announced last month, and I don't know, does an industry do anything? Is it able to prepare for this kind of increase in the lead up?
It's very difficult. I mean, we were already facing 35% duties, and that came into effect in August. And so that was a big blow in itself. And so then adding on this extra 10%, there was a lot of uncertainty as to what the outcome of this Section 232 investigation would be. It sort of stemmed from an executive order that was announced in March. And so it's really challenging. This is unprecedented, the sector facing 45% tariffs.
And so can we talk about the argument that Canadian wood is subsidized because much of the wood is harvested on Crown land? You know, what do you make of that argument, and what has been the response from Canada then?
It really doesn't hold any water. I mean, in British Columbia, we auction off our timber in a market-based system. So there's no evidence of subsidies. This is just really a flawed process, a flawed methodology that's applied by the Department of Commerce. And then in terms of this latest tariff decision, the 10%, that's based on an allegation that somehow imports are a threat to national security. And again, this just doesn't hold any water. It's really, as the Premier said, an absurd sort of statement.
What's been the impact on communities around BC, Kurt?
Well, it's been really difficult. The forest sector contributes sizably to several really across the province, contributes to the well-being of many communities and overall to the provincial economy. So, in August, when the duties came on, we saw immediately quite a drop-off in our shipments to the U.S. And so that has, repercussions throughout the supply chain, and you've seen some curtailments in production.
Let's take a call right now, again, asking you to let us know, what do you think will be the impact of these new tariffs? 10% as of today on lumber entering the United States. And this is on top of already 35% duties and tariffs. And so that brings it up to 45%. What would the impact be on BC's economy and on the forestry industry here? Love to hear from you if you work in forestry, especially, or a related industry. What have the struggles of forestry meant for your livelihood? And what do you think is needed to ensure a future for yourself and for forestry in general? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Watching your emails as well, bctoday@cbc.ca, and your comments on TikTok. Matt is joining us from Ladysmith. Hi, Matt. You worked in forestry.
Good afternoon. Yes, I started in the BC forest industry in '71. I survived the oil embargo of the early '70s. I was involved in the discussions and negotiations regarding the initiation of the original tariffs and duties by the Americans way back in, late '70s, '80s, and around there. Any event.
You've seen a lot, yeah.
I think that the government did an excellent job, both governments during COVID, of making sure money was put into the economy to support workers and companies during that time. I think we need to do the same thing now. Naturally, we continue with negotiations with the Americans, but let's assume what we are seeing, that success there is probably very most unlikely.
You don't have a lot of hope for those talks.
What we have to do is refocus our efforts, take those government funds, redirect them to supporting the existing industry and employees, and solve the other problem, which is horrendous for us, and that is the lack of affordable housing. And this is an excellent time to kill the two birds with one stone. We need housing all over the province that's affordable for all the medium to lower income classes, and this is the way to do it. A new company just opened in Port Alberni making modular homes. That's the exact sort of thing we can do. In addition, when we have to rebuild schools, we should be making them out of lumber and also keeping in mind mass timber construction for apartments and school buildings. And in that way, refocus and look for other markets everywhere else, but at least accomplish something for our economy as we look after the people and companies that are here.
Yeah, really interesting point, Matt. And I wonder, you spent decades in the forest industry. For someone who's younger, going into it now, starting a new job in construction or at a mill, what would you say to them?
Well, if they can see an opportunity, give it a try. It definitely is tougher times now. But if we do the sort of thing that I'm talking about, we've got a good chance of coming out of this ahead. And I think overall, Canada's response to support its sovereignty and to support its economic existence is a very important thing at this time. And you can see already Prime Minister is doing what he can in other nations around the world. Yeah. So, if there's an opportunity, go out and give it a shot. Hopefully it'll pan out. Excuse me, maybe if some of what I'm talking about comes into existence, it could be quite a good situation.
Matt,
And
really,
I
really,
really think for the issue of providing those low and moderate income housing is very important.
yeah. Thank you
When
so
I
much for
came
the
here
comment.
in '71, I was able to get a house for $20,000.
Uh-huh. Yeah, those were the days. Those were the days, Matt. Thank you very much. Really good to hear from you in Ladysmith. Let me go back to Kurt Niquidet at the BC Lumber Trade Council. What do we know of the efforts that the federal government has made? There is a plan, right, to build homes and start these kind of mega projects as well. There's $1.2 billion set aside for the forestry sector that has been impacted, and some of that is to go to forest workers as aid. What to you stands out in terms of what the federal government has done or could do to help forestry out right now? Kurt, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I
but,
can see, yeah. Pardon me. Are you able to hear me now? Still having trouble. Okay, we're having
sound.
problems with our connection with Kurt Niquidet. We'll go back to him. He is president of the BC Lumber Trade Council, and he is our guest for the next half hour here on BC Today. As we take your calls on the new tariffs, 10% new tariffs on lumber imported into the United States, and that's on top of 35% tariffs already that have been announced for BC lumber and wood, and some new tariffs on wood products that are finished as well, things like kitchen cabinets. So asking you, what's the impact on BC's economy? What's the impact on workers in particular? And if you are someone who works or has worked in forestry or a related industry and you are affected, love to hear from you. Our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And it's also pound 690 on your cell phone. Stuart is on the line in Victoria. Hi, Stuart.
Hi there, Michelle.
Yeah, what do you think is the impact of these tariffs?
Well, I've been following the softwood lumber dispute for quite a long time. I just wanted to, remind the listeners that this actually started in 1986, and we've had so many rounds of softwood lumber trade disputes that we actually enumerate them like Roman numerals, like it's the Super Bowl.
Right.
Today's 10% tariff, certainly a Donald Trump tariff, but the 35% tariff was initiated by the Biden administration. So I'm not apologizing for that, but I'm just using this to argue that if we're going to renegotiate our trade agreement with the United States and Mexico, the CUSMA agreement, we have to make a priority of bringing softwood lumber under control. We cannot go from round to round to round with unpredictable tariffs. So this is the priority I would put on this with the federal government. Make sure this thing is wrapped up and we don't see it again in the renegotiation of the trade agreement.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And what is it that keeps, and you're right, I feel like we have been talking about the softwood lumber dispute and agreements between the U.S. and Canada for so many years. What is it that prevents a sustainable treaty or agreement, one that will stave off future tariffs?
That's $1 million question, Michelle. I was working on this in the late 80s. Careers have been made on softwood lumber trade disputes. The BC industry actually has made some interesting maneuvers. A lot of them have accepted, I think, the fact that this is a fixed item in their agenda, and they've invested in lumber plants and lumber facilities in the United States to get behind the tariff wall. There is a fundamental disagreement about how to define a subsidy here, and that's what needs to be brought under control.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That debate over what is a subsidy, right? Stuart, thank you very much for your call, and we do have Kurt Niquidet back now on the line, and who did say that it should not be considered a subsidized industry in terms of BC's lumber. And that is in response to what the U.S. government is arguing. Kurt, my apologies for I think we were having some internet connection issues here at our studio, and my apologies for that. We've had two calls.
No problem.
Two calls now. One saying, well, the federal government should focus on building more housing, right, to increase demand for Canadian wood. I know there's been talk about that. And Stuart just now, who has worked on negotiations when it comes to softwood lumber, saying that really needs to be included in any renegotiation of CUSMA. So I wonder what your thoughts are on what the federal government could do.
Well, the federal government did announce a support package in August, and that included several different measures. It included a loan support program of $700 million, a loan guarantee program. It also included sort of an initiative to boost domestic demand and increase building with wood in Canada, and then also some market diversification funding. So some of that is in play. We just haven't seen that implemented yet. And so I think there is an urgency to move that along. I would say, though, that, it's very important that we have access to the U.S. market. The domestic market, in terms of British Columbia, 85% of our production is exported, and most of that is flowing to the U.S., so it's 75%. So it's great to try to boost the demand domestically, but we have to keep that in context in terms of just the overall global demand out there, and particularly the U.S., and just how important the U.S. is, particularly in the short term. Over the longer term, we're looking to diversify our markets, but that's going to take some time. And then certainly what we're facing right now is an urgent situation, just given the fact that the U.S. is really just quite important for our producers.
No getting around that, is what you're saying. Kurt Niquidet is my guest, president of the BC Lumber Trade Council. He'll join us in our next half hour. We're going to take the ad break now for our TV audience and let you know about something in sports, because this is big news for Blue Jays fans, of course. After 2 defeats against the Seattle Mariners, anxieties are high for those Blue Jay fans on whether or not they will pull back a comeback on the ALCS. The Blue Jays only won the World Series 2 times, back in 92 and 93. And so for kids especially, those years are far and ancient, but they have witnesses that witness their fair share of Jays excitement right now. So CBC Kids News asked kids and teens to share their thoughts on the team and asked them what emoji would they give this season. Have a listen.
Right now, I'd give it like the confetti emoji.
Like the emoji, like the shock emoji. I say the star emoji.
The hat and there's fireworks going on. I would say an apple. This is because we just took down the Big Apple, New York.
It'll probably be the devil emoji, the smiling devil emoji. The crying, laughing.
Oh, I'm a diehard. I've been watching the Blue Jays since I was 6. I'm a diehard Blue Jays fan.
I'm a Blue Jays fan, of course.
I don't know, I just feel like that's not my type of sport.
I'm kind of just there for the ride.
I'm on for the ride. I want to see how it goes.
No, I've been a Blue Jays fan for as long as I remember. When Jose Bautista hit that home run, that's just a memory that sticks with me.
Oh, I think we could easily win.
Don't even get me started.
It's going to be a tough ride.
Yeah, probably.
I do think that we have what it takes.
I think there's a chance.
Oh, that's a good question.
I think it means a lot to Canadians across the country.
It's just super important to have that team.
The whole country can unite over.
I feel like it's nice to see everyone coming together to support them.
Showing up when it matters.
I do like the confidence in their voices. How about a Canadian flag emoji? How about that? Yes, good luck to the Blue Jays. I think tomorrow and Thursday and Friday are games 3, 4, and 5. 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. I hope you had a good long weekend if you did have one and enjoyed your Thanksgiving. Nice to be back with you today. And we are discussing the new lumber tariffs on imports into the United States. And of course, they make up a big chunk of Canadian lumber exports. And we're talking right now with the head of the BC Lumber Trade Council on what impact these tariffs will have on BC's industry and the economy. And given the ongoing challenges of BC's forestry as well, we would love to hear from you and ask you, what has it been like? What's been the impact on your own livelihood? And what do you think are the changes needed to ensure a future for forestry? Lots of calls coming in. We'll get to James at Spence's Bridge, Laura in Port Alberni, certainly a forest town there, along with Kurt Niquidet. And at 12:45, more on the provincial response as well. That is all coming up after the CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. A new medical school said to be Western Canada's first in decades is now taking applications. The provincial government says SFU's new medical school will begin classes in a temporary location at the school's Surrey campus in August. A permanent location at Surrey City Centre is expected to open in 5 years. As we've been hearing on the show, Premier David Eby is pushing for more support for the lumber industry as additional U.S. tariffs come into effect. In a letter to Mark Carney, Eby says the federal government should prepare emergency supports for affected workers and contractors. Late last month, U.S. President Donald Trump announced 10% tariffs on imported timber and lumber, as well as 25% on kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and upholstered furniture. And the BC Wildfire Service says a late-season fire has been burning out of control east of Vernon. It was discovered yesterday and grew to almost 7 hectares. It's burning near Highway 6 north of Lavington. And now the forecast on the north coast. A mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 11. Highs to 13 with lots of sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, sunny with a high of 8. Highs to 15 and mainly sunny in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny as well with a high of 12. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs up to 15. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Rob. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And as we continue to talk about forestry here on BC Today this hour, again, taking your calls, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Also taking your emails to bctoday@cbc.ca, asking you, how are forestry struggles affecting your own livelihood, and what changes do you think are needed to ensure a future for the industry in BC? Joanne writes from Victoria, born and raised in Prince George. All of my 6 brothers and father worked in the forest industry, from falling trees, sawmills, and pulp mills. And the industry before Trump has been a boom or bust because of Canada's strip and ship of natural resources. What Canada needs to do is ship across the country, use grade A lumber at home instead of seconds that we get left with when we do it yourself. We're often forced to get softwood lumber at Home Depot, which is further assaulting our economy. It's an American company. Bonnie writes from Prince George, I'm now retired from a career with the BC Ministry of Forests. Softwood lumber tariffs have been an issue for my entire career, so this is nothing new. I now have very little sympathy for the forest industry, as they've been dealing with this for over 40 years, and despite all of the suggestions to create value-added products, the lumber industry continues to produce pretty much only dimension lumber instead of investing in facilities that might create value-added products. Our industry has chosen to just invest in lumber-producing facilities outside of our country. Bonnie, thank you very much to mentioning Prince George there. Again, our email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Love to hear from you. You're with BC Today. We are asking you how BC's forest industry is struggling and how that is affecting your own livelihood. If you are starting out in the industry, we'd love to hear from you, what your thoughts are on the future and what changes are needed, and your reaction to today's new 10% tariffs on U.S. lumber imports. You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Kurt Niquidet, president of the BC Lumber Trade Council. We have him for about 5 more minutes. And Kurt, let me just put to you that question of what about the industry's own transition and diversification to more value added and ensuring its sustainability?
Well, I would say I just wanted to maybe address the comment about that this is nothing new, and certainly we've been facing duties for the softwood lumber dispute has gone on for 40 years, and we've been without an agreement since 2015. But really, what we're facing now is really unprecedented. We've never faced 45% duties, combined duties and tariffs before. So this is really quite, substantial, and really there needs to be an urgent sort of attention on this issue. In terms of what in diversification, I think we're certainly feel like that it needs to be done. It's just going to take some time. And certainly we're appreciative of some of the supports from the federal government on this issue. There actually will be a trade mission in November seeking to diversify our markets, and we have been sending lumber and other products really throughout the globe.
But what
but the
about
US
diversifying the products themselves away from lumber to value added?
And there's been a lot of that. There's certainly within British Columbia, there's a vast array of products that are produced. Softwood lumber is about 45% of the forest products sort of exports, but we produce a vast array of other products. But some of those other products are also getting caught up in these tariffs, and so it's not necessarily if we diversify into different products that we also won't be subject to these sorts of measures from the U.S.
But how do you ensure then the sustainability of this industry? Despite even outside of these tariffs, again, the industry has been facing challenges for years, and there's also just a finite amount that you can harvest, right? So how do you ensure a sustainable industry in the future?
We have really world-class forestry practices. The chief forester of the province sets what's called an allowable annual cut, and that's taking into consideration multiple values. And we're actually harvesting well below that level. And so, and we've also, most of the companies who operate in British Columbia have third-party sustainability certification. So I think British Columbia is really known as a world-class jurisdiction when it comes to forestry practices.
Kurt, I know you do have to go to another appointment. I'm sure it's a very busy day. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your being on the program. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle.
Kurt Niquidet is the Executive Director of the BC Lumber Trade Council. And we are taking your calls, continuing to take your calls on the impact of these tariffs and on the ongoing challenges at BC's forest industry and how they have been affecting you. Many forestry towns, of course, in the province, including Port Alberni. And Laura joins us now from there. Laura, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. Yeah, glad to be here. I would beg to defer with your CEO or tradesman exec representative because, first of all, if we're putting out such a world-class standard, then why is it that companies like Mosaic are profiting from Crown land all over British Columbia, where we have like the most logging, obviously, and the most fire, and the most forest fires, basically, if you could it. But the point is we've raised 4 children over 25 years through the forest industry, through layoffs, and we're seeing the same. It's just redundant. It's the same problems because we're not putting out softwood. 45% of our exports are softwood. It should be 100%. And any building projects in Canada there should be legislation passed nationally that we use Canadian lumber. We're the second biggest country in the world. We need to start acting like it. We need to realize that the States is trying to annex us, and instead of playing into their game, we just set our own rules with a different one because we don't need to kowtow to them. We don't. We could just step away and diversify our market, our software lumber market, with Europe, with Asia. It's endless.
And Kurt made the point that we can do that, but right now, or for the foreseeable future, the U.S. is still an integral market. Laura, what did you make of
I
that
think
comment?
Canada could go into debt, I really do, so that we could manufacture our own products and get our own GDP and not be so reliant on America. I think that's the point that Carney's trying to make, is invest in our own country. Absolutely. We need to be making our own steel, and we need to amp up our softwood lumber production and stop shipping logs.
Laura, you raised 4 kids growing up working in forestry? They've worked in forestry?
My husband worked for the PPWC. We were fortunate enough not to get on with the American steel workers, and we sat through shutouts and shutdowns and layoffs, and I have done it all, and it's the same sad song that they're playing. And subsidies are great from the government, but it's not sustainable. I'd rather see them put money into investing in our own country.
Laura,
absolutely.
Yeah, really good to hear from you, Laura. I'm glad you stayed on. Thank you.
You're welcome. You have a wonderful day.
You too. That's Laura at Port Alberni, saying she's seen her family through the ups and downs of forestry in BC. James is our next caller now at Spence's Bridge as we discuss the impacts of the new tariffs in place today and the ongoing challenges of BC's forest industry. Hi, James. Welcome.
Oh, hello. Over the decades listening to the media, I understand that the Americans are annoyed at the stumpage fees for logs in Canada, in the various provinces, particularly BC. And since provinces like BC didn't increase stumpage fees as requested by Americans, I guess, they decided to put tariffs on. And now the Americans are reaping all sorts of tariff profits or tariff revenues. And that money is leaving BC. And in the next trade deal, I think BC should talk to the Americans, along with other provinces, and ask, what will it take to eliminate the tariffs? If we increase the stumpage fees, will that eliminate the tariffs? And it'd be far better for the BC government to put essentially higher stumpage fees or export tariffs on its own logs and keep the money in BC to reinvest in the forest industry, rather than having Americans take those tariff dollars away from Canadians. So hopefully we have a good trade negotiation in the future about this.
Really interesting point about the stumpage rates, and I think I did see an email to that effect as well. Thank you very much, James. Really interesting point there, looking at the stumpage fees and including that in the renegotiation of the Canada-U.S. trade agreement, Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Victor is next now in Brackendale. Hi, Victor. Your thoughts on the ongoing struggles at BC's forestry and the impact of today's new tariffs?
Yes. Why are we exporting logs to the United States instead of processing them here? Tons of logs are going down to Washington, Oregon, wherever, and our mills are shutting down because our mills are owned by the Americans. So what they've done, they've busted the unions up here.
Okay.
They're all non-union now, and they're using our logs to make lumber. And here we are, unemployed. Why?
Are you yourself unemployed as a result of this?
No, I'm retired, but I was in the industry, so I can see the downfall. At one time, we used to export millions of feet of lumber to the western seaboard in the States. We used to export millions of tons of pulp, which is now, with computer and everything else.
A decline in the demand for that. Okay. Okay, Victor, thank you very much for your call. Again, we're taking more of your calls for the next 15 minutes on the issue of forestry facing new lumber import tariffs into the United States, 10% as of today. This was announced in the last month. Now, that is on top of 35% duties and tariffs that were put in place in the months before that. So put that together, it's 45%, another tough another tough increment for BC's forest industry. So we want to hear from you. If you work in the industry, if you have, let us know what the impact of the challenges what the impact has been on you, your livelihood. We've heard from a few already. I'd love to hear from you. And what do you think needs to change in order to ensure its future here in BC? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, as we mentioned, BC's Premier David Eby has written a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney urging urgent action on softwood lumber, saying it should be as urgent as the actions that have been announced for steel and aluminum and the auto industry. And joining us now for more on that and what was said this morning by the Premier and the Forest Minister is Katie DeRosa, our CBC Provincial Affairs reporter. And Katie joins me now from Victoria. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Michelle.
I saw a little bit of the Premier this morning. What did he have to say in terms of what the province is calling for from the federal government?
Well, he really put the heat on Prime Minister Mark Carney, saying that he needs to make good on the $1.2 billion that Carney announced in August in Kelowna. That was support for forestry industries, forestry companies to diversify their trade beyond the U.S. The Premier says we don't know how much of that is coming to BC. We don't know what BC's share is. So he says that money has to flow immediately. Otherwise, these forestry companies and adjacent industries such as trucking and mills could be, their survival is at risk. He also said that the federal government needs to come forward with enhanced supports for workers who do lose their jobs, such as enhanced EI, and measures to prevent those workers from losing their jobs in the first place, such as reskilling or alternate jobs for them. And again, as you mentioned, the Premier says the Prime Minister needs to treat forestry with the same level of urgency that it has been treating Ontario's auto sector, Quebec's aluminum industry, and the Premier saying he has reason to be worried because he thinks BC has been forgotten in the past. So he's really putting the ball in Mark Carney's court to make sure that these tariffs are reversed by President Trump.
Now, when it comes to how competitive BC's products are, I know he made some comments around that. Can you tell us more about what he said there?
Well, Eby says that BC is the second largest exporter of softwood lumber, second to Russia. And he says that these tariffs, which are stacked on top of each other with the additional 10% put on as of midnight today, amount to 45%. And that's higher than Russia's tariff. So here's a bit of what he had to say on that.
This additional tariff means that Canadian wood has a higher tariff rate going to the United States than Russia does. I want to let that sink in, that there's a higher tariff on Canadian wood going to the United States, wood that has built American homes, provided affordable and high quality building materials for families and governments across the United States. Our friends south of the border with whom we have worked side by side, fought side by side, that we have worse market access than Russia, an international pariah who has launched a war of aggression on Ukraine. It doesn't make any sense.
So, clearly the Premier is putting that out in stark comparison, asking why is it that BC's tariffs are so high? This softwood lumber industry, softwood lumber dispute isn't new. It's been going on for 30 years, but, it's just getting worse. And so the Premier was standing alongside people from the forestry industry saying there's not much more we can take and really something has to be done.
And what do we know about how the province is responding to these tariffs?
Well, the premier was asked that, and he said the province is not just sitting by and waiting for the federal government. He said that the forestry investment arm, which is the government's agency to go out and try and diversify, it already has offices in Vancouver, India, China, but it's expanding into the UK to try and get those our softwood lumber to European markets. He says the BC government is also launching an ad campaign in the US to make clear to legislators in the US that this dispute is hurting the U.S. just as much as it is Canada, because the lumber that is used to build homes will be more expensive, and it will be more expensive to rebuild those homes, especially in parts of California, which was ravaged by a wildfire. So the government is really trying to make clear how punishing these tariffs are on both sides. But again, really putting the ball in the court of the federal government in terms of the negotiation with the U.S. president, as well as the supports for workers.
And we have been speaking with the BC Lumber Trade Council during the show, Katie, but I know there's a joint statement by stakeholders in the industry. Overall, what is their message?
Well, yeah, they're backing what the premier is asking the federal government to do. But, we heard from the United Steelworkers, for example, and they said they want people to see this more as a number, way more than the 45% figure, but as workers who could lose their jobs, their families, the communities that rely on those forestry industries in some of those rural communities where the forestry sector really props up all the related sectors such as retail and trucking and the jobs connected. So they're saying we need to think about this in terms of who will lose jobs if some of these companies have to downsize, and the impact on workers. So they're trying to ground that in the jobs that could be lost, and really again putting the pressure on the Prime Minister to come to some sort of deal that's going to lessen the blow from these tariffs.
Katie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle.
CBC's Katie DeRosa joining us from Victoria and taking more of your calls on the impact of these new tariffs in effect today, and how the ongoing struggles and challenges of BC's forest industry have affected your own livelihood. Hearing from a lot of people who have raised families, who have worked in forestry in BC or a forest-adjacent industry. Our next caller now is Molly at Campbell River. Hi, Molly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for calling in.
I want to state that I support fully not only the loggers, but the adjacent industries. Like, I'm personally a teacher, and all of the people that I've worked with up in the interior, where my family is deeply embedded in the logging industry, including grandchildren, to where I live now in Campbell River, where the people that come to my school are deeply embedded in the logging industry. And sorry, I'm rattling a little bit because I expected to be on a phone call or a message. Anyway, I think that the highlight here is that everyone in BC is affiliated with the BC logging industry. There's not a single person that you can look to. I'm looking at Cal Tire right now. They depend on the logging industry. Doctors and nurses do. And so this is affecting everybody in BC and most of Canada. And I don't know if I can say this or not, but Donald Trump often changes his mind very quickly. So we need to respond to it with urgency. But my big takeaway is I think that the people who are directly involved in industry should start building mills immediately. They should be paid by Canadians. And I know I'm repeating something other people said, so I'll stop there.
Molly, really good to hear from you. And I'm glad you rattled off all the people who in your community who are tied to forestry. It really sent that message home. Thank you for your call. Let's head up now to Smithers, and Ryan is on the line. You work in a forest-adjacent industry, Ryan.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm fine. Tell us about your own life and how you're affected.
I worked for 7 years in reforestation before going and doing my master's in forestry. And I ended up moving out of the industry because of my fear of the long-term situation for jobs.
You were dissuaded because of that, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, that was a previous job.
Pardon me, what do you think needs to be done now then?
I think as a province, we need to reimagine how this industry looks. A number of our forestry companies that are, BC made, they now own more mills in the U.S., and that far predates Donald Trump. So I think what we can do is look at strengthening how we make better decisions to manage diverse values, whether it's wildlife or drought and wildfire resiliency, and timber, and making that wood and that value-added production locally or at least provincially. So I think, in short, starting with much bigger community forests where we have much better oversight on what decisions are being made.
Really good to hear from you, Ryan. Thank you so much. And our last call, let's stay up north at Terrace, and George is on the line now. Hi, George. Welcome. Hi, George. Are you there? I think we may have lost our connection with George. George in Terrace, I think, was also going to say we need more value-added products and need to stop shipping raw logs and need to create employment opportunities here at home. George, my apologies for losing your call. We're going to try and get him back, though. George, are you there?
Yeah, hello.
Hi there. I apologize. I did go through a little bit of what you wanted to say, but to tell me about, the point you wanted to make about creating those opportunities here at home.
Well, I think any natural resource from Canada should be processed here locally. I remember in the old days, I believe it was the NDP that put a ban on raw log export out of British Columbia. I think that could be entertained again. Myself, being from Terrace, British Columbia, we had 4 sawmills before, which employed many people in the region. Now we have none. A lot of our raw logs are being exported as raw logs. We need to process our raw materials at home. As a suggestion, possibly First Nations that hold inherent rights to the territories of which these logs are on, they could possibly make arrangements with other First Nations within North America to avoid the tariffs that Donald Trump is putting on us. Just as a suggestion, get away from the colonial jurisdictional powers and start implementing some real benefits to the people and citizens of this country where
George,
the raw resources are coming from. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your call. That's George in Terrace. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca.